So guys, we have to talk about the ONS report for UK retail sales in December. And the reason is that the December trading period is so key for the UK retail industry. It's the key Christmas lead up. And generally speaking, we expect the economy to explode into December as people purchase all those gifts. Now that has simply not happened this year. And we need to look into this data because honestly, it's incredibly worrying when you couple it with the GDP growth, when you couple it with the jobs data, and when you couple it with the pound versus dollar. I've got all the charts to the left of me here, and I'm going to go through all of it with you today because I think it paints a very, very bleak picture. And you can see on all the data points this inflection point of when Labour came into government. And the mood of the nation has clearly switched. So guys, if you like this sort of video, if you like this sort of content, please give it a big like. It does help me out with the algorithm. And if you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing. Until I get to 10,000 subscribers, you can book an absolutely free one-to-one call with me. Just look for the link in the description. I have nothing to sell to you. I just want to connect with my audience. So guys, let's go into the data. Let's have a look at what's been released by the ONS. So on the screen right now should be the chart from the ONS that states what the GB retail sales figures are. As you can see, in December, we actually had a pullback of 0.2% in GB retail sales. Now the market was actually expecting it to grow, but we've actually gone into a contraction for that month. Now, GB retail sales actually includes quite a lot of things. So for us to really get a sense of what's going on under the hood, I believe it's better to look at the retail sales excluding fuel, because that gives us an understanding of what the actual consumer is going out and buying. And this is where the story gets a little bit worse. It doesn't get better, it gets worse. So you should have a chart up in front of you now that shows you it excluding fuel. And as you can see, we've got a drop of 0.6% in December. That's a huge contraction during what should be a major trading period for UK PLC, the run up to Christmas, the period where people spend. And this is because the mood of the nation is incredibly negative. So I believe a lot of that can be attributed to the following chart, which I'm going to show you, which is the GDP growth. This is the growth in the UK economy. And I think when we take this and the jobs data together, you can understand why people are starting to feel negative. And you can clearly see that since the beginning of this year, when we started to grow the economy, and once the Conservatives were out of power and Labour had taken power, the mood of the nation has kind of shifted. I certainly see the inflection point in this chart, but I also see it in the dollar to GDP, and I see it in the 10-year gilt. So I think that this is a direct response to Labour policies. So we've got 0.7% growth at the beginning of the year, 0.4% in Q2, and in Q3, zero growth. And with this contraction we can see in retail sales, people are saying that it's highly likely that the UK may contract in Q4. And that means if we have one more quarter of contraction, we will enter a technical recession. Now the warning signs are all there for me. This is the GDP growth, okay? We can see that this is on a decline. Let's have a look at the jobs vacancies. And this is probably the most shocking chart of all. As you can see, every single month without fail, and the decline has become more steep, job vacancies in the UK are shrinking. And the anecdotal evidence I've got from that, from people I'm speaking to, is people are cutting back on hiring. Why? The national insurance increase. People are looking at ways of implementing technology and making sure they don't need those extra people. And that is incredibly dangerous. Labour has essentially spurred UK PLC on to make job cuts because they've put a tax on jobs. Now, I know they said they wouldn't raise tax for working people. Maybe that's true. Maybe you're just going to lose your job instead. And that seems to be playing out with the jobs data. Now, it's important to say we still have a very low unemployment rate in the UK. We really do. We still have a low unemployment rate, but it is starting to creep up. We also have very high vacancies if you compare to historic times. So it's not all panic stations today, but what I would say is this is clearly showing a decline in the number of vacancies. And if you put a jobs tax, and remember, the jobs tax has not even taken effect yet. That happens in April. Companies still have time to make redundancies, to freeze hiring, to make themselves more efficient and use less staff before that comes into effect. So I believe we may well see an ever steepening curve to this graph, and I'm very interested in bringing you this data in the next couple of months when I think it's going to go down much quicker and much harder. What does this mean for the UK economy? Well, the markets aren't impressed. The 30-year gilt is at the highest rate it has been for 25 years. That means the money that the government need to borrow is more expensive because the people who are lending it don't believe in the plan. So the 30-year gilt is at the highest rate for 25 years. The 10-year gilt has spiked. It's now coming down a little bit, but it has certainly spiked and has essentially meant that most of the tax rises that this Labour government have put in place will be spent on interest payments. They won't be spent on what was intended. They will be spent on interest to financial institutions. Now this is probably the worst of all worlds. You raise taxes, the markets go, we don't like that plan. They say you're going to need to pay more if you want to borrow money. You then have to pay more and you have to raise taxes again. Or you have to cut spending. Now I expect in the next 3 to 4 months the government is probably going to have to cut spending. And when they do, I expect the market to have a positive outlook on that plan. I think it's similar to if you were lending money to your friend and your friend, you looked at their balance sheet and you were like, your spending is just out of control. You do not earn enough to be able to repay me. That is what the markets are saying. You need to cut your spending so we know you can repay us. And the pressure on the government to do that is growing. Now, what do I think as an investor and entrepreneur the outcome is likely to be? Well, for my property portfolio, I've got about £2 million worth of debt. If we do not reverse the increase in taxes and the increase in spending, it is likely that interest rates will be higher for longer. So my £2 million worth of debt, I will pay a higher amount of interest on that for a longer period of time. And already my margins have been squeezed. I used to make £10,000–12,000 a month. I'm now lucky if I make 2 or 3. And that is all interest. So if anyone says to you, landlords at the moment are having a great time, no, we have had a massive increase in interest. And because of that, a lot of our margins have been eroded. And yes, if you're a renter and you're watching this and you're thinking, but my rents have gone up, not enough, especially down south. Down south, in London, for example, I've got a property worth about £400,000. The interest payments on the loan of 300 and something thousand is about £1,500 a month. The rent, due to affordability, is only £1,600 a month. Guess what? After my tax, after my voids, my maintenance, everything else, there's no margin in it whatsoever. If we could have doubled the rent like we have in many of the northern cities where rents used to be £500–600 a month and now they're £1,000 a month, yes, there would be no issue. And in those parts of my portfolio, we're still performing well because the extra nominal interest was 300, rents have gone up by 400, it's covered it and it's covered the increase in all the other areas where we have to spend money, such as maintenance. So there are areas of my portfolio that are doing well and areas that aren't. But I'm steadying my ship, understanding that interest rates higher for longer means that I need to cut spending. So I'm acting responsibly, unlike our government. I'm saying that if we have to pay more and we cannot afford it, we have to scale back some of our plans. Now let me put my entrepreneur hat on. I have a few businesses in the UK. Again, I'm looking at the UK as an unfavourable place to employ people. Some of my businesses, some of the work can be done overseas. And that's exactly what we've done. We've set up an office over in India. We've moved 8 fairly well-paid jobs over to India and we've saved about 80% of the wage. That in itself sets to make the business far more sustainable, and our aim with that company is to essentially move as many UK jobs abroad as we possibly can. And this is the capitalist in me. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just doing what the government told me to do. They are saying, if you want to employ people in the UK, we're going to make it very expensive. I'm saying, okay, well, as a business owner, if I can move jobs where it's cheaper and I can still get the same quality of work, I will do so. I will move it to more favourable areas. And that's exactly what we're doing. So we're listening and we're reacting. Now you play this on a national or global scale, and that's exactly where the money's going. It's already happened in manufacturing. It's now happening in services, which I'm involved in. So manufacturing, it all moved to China. Taiwan, places where labour was much, much cheaper. India is a great example again. The service sector is now doing the same. And the UK services sector is a huge proportion of UK GDP. So I think personally that we are on a downward spiral of negative growth. And this is because the socialist dream of a high tax percentage and high tax receipts go hand in hand. It's just not true. Millionaires are leaving the UK at a faster rate than any other country apart from China. And China's got over 1 billion people. The UK is losing so much wealth to people like myself who have moved abroad. I've moved to Dubai exactly for that reason. I don't believe that I get value for money in the UK. I can live a better lifestyle out in Dubai. And the UK could compete. It was the whole point. It was what we were pitched when we left the EU. Take control, they said. What they didn't say is we're going to tax you more. And that is where the complete disconnect from reality and capitalism happens. So guys, let me know your thoughts. What do you think is next? I think a recession in 2025 is very highly likely. And with that, I am readying my ship to withstand it. What's your thoughts? I'll make sure I reply to every comment down below, and I will see you on the next video. Like and subscribe as always. Cheers guys.